Welcome everybody to part 4 of our Heroes of the Faith series. Wow, I can't believe we're already halfway through. That also means we're coming up to the halfway point of the summer. All kids go, oh. All parents go, yes, nearly there. Everyone has their own perspective at the summer, whether you're enjoying it, whether you're finding it difficult. I hope that we can come together and really just enjoy this time. And this week we're going to be digging into Jacob. Another interesting character, like his grandfather Abraham. A very interesting story, some good things, some bad things, some things we can learn from, some things we should not repeat. But yes, he's a very famous guy, obviously. He had 12 kids through various women. He did some good things, he did some bad things. He was very go-getting is the best way to describe it. And we see this right from the beginning. This beginning kind of sets the scene of Jacob for how the story is going to go. And we can read this in Genesis 25, that his Rebecca, Jacob's mum, is pregnant with both him and his brother. And we read, the children struggled together within her. She said, if it is thus, why is this happening to me? So she went to inquire of the Lord. The Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples are within shall be divided. And one shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. So right from the beginning, we see this outset of these both kids as part of this nation idea. They're going to this blessing on Abraham that you may have heard if you watched last week, that this patriarchal blessing, and this is bestowed upon God's people, and it follows through the lineage. And so this blessing on God's people is that they form nations, they form people. And so Esau and Jacob, the 2 sons of Isaac, will both form a nation. They're wrestling in the womb. They're these go-getting at each other. If you've had 2 boys, you probably know they like to be at each other. And the classic boy, like they're even doing this in the womb. So yeah, it's this struggle, but this is the context of the story of Jacob. He is a wrestler, he is a struggler, he is an overcomer. And God promises this, he will be the one that is stronger than his brother. His brother will serve him in the long term. So it's this kind of mentality where we are joining the story roughly around 1800 to 1700 BC, if we hold an older date of the Exodus and also with the context of Abraham. Babylon and Egypt are the only real powers at this time. And actually, this story kind of fits within this historical context where God's people, kind of out of them come people. Like you've got out of Esau a people come. And this actually reflects the time where in this time the Hittites, the Assyrians, and all these other nations are kind of forming. This is a time of life in history where nations form. So it's very symbolic of the time that out of Isaac come these nations. It's fitting. And also we have this whole time where there's a migration of people from Israel into all this land from south of the Middle East, where they are migrating into Egypt. And in history they're called the Hyksos people. And in a sense this is actually referred to in the text, where we read in Genesis 26, now there was a famine in the land, beside the former famine that was in the days of Abraham. And Isaac went to Gerar to Abimelech, the king of the Philistines. And the Lord appeared to him and said, do not go down to Egypt. Dwell in the land which I shall tell you. Sojourn in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. For to you and your offspring I will give these lands, and I will establish the oath that I swore to Abraham your father. So this is pre-Jacob, obviously. And going to Egypt was that natural response that people had when there was a famine. Egypt was a land of grain, they had the Nile, they had food. But here, this is where we see the season of history with the Hyksos people and the times where people would migrate to Egypt. These non-Egyptians migrate in and eventually become powerful within the land. So that's this context. And the history makes sense as now we have the context. Let's keep reading the story. Is when her days, we can jump back to Rebecca and the birth of Jacob and Esau. When her days to give birth were completed, behold, there were twins in her womb. The first came out, and all his body was like a hairy cloak, So they named him Esau. Afterwards, his brother came out holding Esau's heel. So they called him Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. When the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man dwelling in tents. Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. So we have this picture of Jacob, Esau, and the family being painted. A classic family. The father loving upon his eldest son, who brings him lovely food to eat and relishing and enjoying the talents that his eldest son has. And the mother loving the younger son because he's at home, helping, being present, and just being around the house. All parents appreciate when their children help them. This is a classic stereotypical style of family, where they have two children, the children help, and the parents love upon them. We see with a bit of splitting. I wouldn't encourage you to love one more than the other, but this is what we have. And we see that Jacob is really part of this under his mother. He's at the home, he's helping, whereas Esau is out the field. And we read in Genesis 25, and Esau said to Jacob, and he just come in, "Let me eat some of that red stew, for I am exhausted." Therefore his name was to be called Edom. Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright now." Esau said, "I am about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me?" Jacob said, "Swear to me now." So he swore to him and sold to Jacob his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. So we see here Jacob at home, cooking, being part of the family, but he's crafty. He uses the situation to benefit himself. He may not be physically very go-getting, but he's very mentally crafty, and as we call him, a sly fox in some sense, where he takes every opportunity to get one over others, including his own brother. And this is the picture painted of Jacob. Not only was he a wrestler with his brother in the womb who held on to his brother's heel, like he's fighting, he's go-getting, even though his brother may go out first, I'm there, I'm coming too. Even then, as he grow up, he sell me your birthright or you're not getting any food. He'd rather let his brother die and to get the birthright himself than give him food. There's this very sly, sneaky character of Jacob who rips everyone else off. But unfortunately for Esau, this is very important because God holds these things to account. God holds what we say and what we do to account. And this is very true because of the very next segment of the story, there's a bit of delay, but we get back and we see that the next time we meet Jacob is when his father blesses him and when he's about to die. So if we jump to there, we see this inheritance is the blessing, is the patriarchal blessing. So then his father Isaac said to him, "Come near and kiss me, my son." So he came near and kissed, and Isaac smelled the smell of his garments, and blessed him and said, "See, the smell of my son is the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give you the dew of heaven, and the fatness of the earth, and the plentiness of the grain and wine. Let peoples serve you, and nations bow down to you. Be Lord over your brothers, and may your mother's sons bow down to you. May cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you." So we see this patriarchal blessing of Abraham in there, but also this fatherly blessing to his eldest son. And he thinks he's blessing Esau, but he's obviously blessing Jacob. So that's the fulfillment of the selling of the birthright. So Jacob gets the physical inheritance of his brother. But through this craftiness where his brother goes out to get game, his mother and him craft a plan, they sneak in, and he steals the spiritual inheritance from his brother. And God blesses him because God holds Isaac's words true. Just as he holds Esau's words true of denying his birthright, he holds his father's words true even though he's blessing the wrong son. He still blesses Jacob. It's almost like he was involved in this, but it's this whole idea that everything we say, everything we do, has an impact. And God will hold to us account of what we say as well as what we do. And we see this even in the New Testament and throughout Scripture. In Acts 5, we read, "But Peter said to Ananias, and why has Satan filled your heart to lie to the Holy Spirit and keep back for yourself a part of what proceeds of the land? While it remained unsold, did it not remain your own? After it was sold, was it not at your disposal? Why is it then have you contrived this deed in your heart, that you have lied not to man, but to God?" When Ananias heard these words, he fell down and breathed his last, and a great fear came over the people. Peter spoke, of course, filled with the Holy Spirit, but he spoke in such a way that his words had impact and that God applied them and killed Ananias. And then obviously Sapphira comes later and does the very same thing. And again, Peter speaks basically the death of Sapphira and she dies. Was Peter's words the things that killed him? No. But God fulfilled the words that Peter said. Just as he fulfilled the words that Isaac said to Jacob. There's this element that what we say, what we do, has effect. And it's Jesus says the same, that we should, in Matthew 5, that we should not take oaths. Let your yes be a yes and your no be a no. Anything more than that is evil. There's this element that what we say yes and no to, that we need to be careful what we swear by. The rest of that verse is, don't swear by heaven, because what we swear by has an effect. So the words that we use are powerful. And today we don't really think of that, or we throw words around quite easily. But God holds the words we say to account. And this is one of the first lessons we can learn from Jacob is God uses his people, and the blessings he speaks are important, the curses he speaks are important, and how we are involved in that as part of the people of God are important. Who we bless are blessed, who we curse are cursed, who we forgive are forgiven, and who blesses us and curses us, equal repercussions will be pulled onto them. So it's good to know that our words have an effect, just as they did in the story of Jacob and Isaac. So we now jump on. Jacob gets the blessing. Esau wants to kill him, so he flees. His mother hears it, tells him, "Go, run to a relative." So he goes to Laban, a relative of Rebekah. And on the way, in Genesis 28, we read this very interesting story, that Jacob left Beersheba and went towards Haran. And he came to a certain place and stayed there that night, because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones of the place, he put it under his head, and he lay down in that place to sleep. And he dreamed, and behold, there was a ladder set up on the earth, and in the top reached to heaven. And behold, the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above and said, "I am the Lord, the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac. The land in which you lie, I will give to your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and shall spread abroad to the west, and to the east, and to the north, and to the south. And in you and your offspring shall be all the families of the earth be blessed. And behold, I am with you, and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I promised." So we see this element of the patriarchal blessing is there. This fulfillment of what his father blessed on him. There's this human language of God in there. And God affirms that Jacob will be part of the lineage of his people. That he is the God of his father and his grandfather, and now of him. So there's this real clear family lineage, and the blessings that are bestowed, and the protection that comes with it. And as a result of this dream, seeing God in a dream, and the angels and all of this, Jacob then said, and dedicated the place, and said, "Then Jacob made a vow, saying, if God will be with me, and will keep me in this way, in the way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God. And this stone, which I've set it up for a pillar, shall be God's house. And all that you give me, I will give a full tenth to you." Jacob makes a vow. He uses his words in an important way, affirming that he will be God's people, affirming that he will align with his father's house, affirming that he trusts in God's promise. And if God says, holds his part, he will give a 10%. There's 10%. We see it crop up and we go, oh, what? But this is cultural. This is something that was more than cultural even. It was embedded. That just because we see it, this isn't something abnormal. The 10% is something that we see even to this day, where people say, take the 10% and put it in a bank and save it for yourself. And in their day, the full tenth would be something you gave to something you were dedicated to loyal to. And of course, in the law it was commanded. But we see in this culture that it always existed, this tenth, this tithe. And it's this part of this, if I'm loyal to God's house, if I'm part of his people, I tithe as part of that physical pronunciation. The things I say and the things I do announce that I'm part of God's people through what I give with my money and through what I do with my actions and how I bless others. So there's this element that Jacob fulfills and lays out this vow to fulfill that as a response to God's dream. And I think that's powerful because it brings into effect the wordings and the testament of wording in action of what we could do to respond to the calling of God. So of course, then from there he goes to his father-in-law Laban. It's a turbulent time. They both are back and forth trying to outdo one another, and they agree on a wife. Laban then tricks him and gives him the wrong daughter. I don't know how that would happen if you would turn up to your wedding and somehow by the evening you're like, that's not the right lady. Shows how, I don't know how much Jacob saw Rachel. But I would be pretty shocked if I married one lady and went to marry a lady and didn't recognize her enough to get the wrong lady. But that's the story. So determined to marry that lady, he does another 7 years and he fights to the end, and eventually it pinnacles. The fight between Jacob and Laban comes to a point that God intervenes and says, the angel of the Lord said to me in a dream, Jacob. And I said, here I am. And he said, lift up your eyes and see. All the goats that mated the flock are striped, spotted, and molted. For I have seen all that Laban is doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and made a vow to me. Now arise and go out from this land and return to the land of your kindred. So God comes in, he takes the situation and goes, look, I'm going to help you. There was a promise between Laban and Jacob that Jacob would have all of those striped, spotted, and molded flock. And he's saying, look, they will be yours. I'm going to give you all that you need. But now take and act upon this dream at Babel. Come back to the land. Trust that I will protect you and I will guide you, and go and be my representative. So we have a clear instruction from God. Go. But it begins with this: lift your eyes. Get your eyes off the situation and look at me. And sometimes we can be like that too, where we have a situation where we find it difficult and it's very, and God comes, get your eyes off the situation and look at me. That will help set the perspective. And that's what Jacob needed. He needed his eyes to be focused on God, so his perspective was right. So eventually, after a difficult and sneaky, crafty escape, classic Jacob, he escapes. They agree not to harm each other, and so they move on. So with one enemy down, Jacob now has to turn back and face his brother. And if this is the classic lifestyle of trying to avoid the difficult. Jacob sends things, trying to make him amends. He's a very stereotypical person that doesn't like to deal with difficult things. He, instead of dealing with conflict and difficulty, he tries to tiptoe his way around. And it eventually gets too much that he has to deal with it. And that's not the way God's called us to be. He's not asked us to tiptoe around difficulty. He says, go, deal with it, and I will be with you and protect you. So now he's aiming to go and meet his brother Esau. God intervenes again. And we see in Genesis 32 this famous story where Jacob wrestles with God. So as they've left, they cross over, they come to this place, and they're moving back towards the land of where Bethel was. And so this is where we read, "The same night he arose and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and 11 children, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. And he took them and sent them across the stream, and everything he had. And Jacob was left alone. And a man wrestled with him until the breaking of day. And when the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he touched his hip socket. And Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. And then he said, 'Let me go, for day has broken.' But Jacob said, 'I will not let you go until you bless me.' Unless he said to me, and then he said to him, 'What's your name?' And he said, 'Jacob.' Then he said, 'Your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with men, but have prevailed.' Then Jacob asked him, 'Please tell me your name.' And the man blessed, but then he said, 'Why is it you ask my name?' And then he blessed him. But so Jacob called that name of the place, saying, 'For Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been delivered.' The sun rose upon him as he passed Peniel, limping because of his hip. Therefore to this day the people of Israel do not eat sinew of the hip thigh, that is on the hip socket, because he touched the socket of Jacob's hip on the sinew of the thigh." So it's a very interesting section. Jacob is alone. And alone a man appears to him. We don't know how this all came, but a man appears. And they wrestle. And they wrestle all night. And this is the part where God is restrained in a sense of he's in human form. He's engaging with Jacob, wrestling. But he has to leave by sunrise. We see that he says, "You need to let me go because it's sunbreak." And Jacob's like, "Well, why?" Because and then it dawns on him. It's part of this dawning that over the wrestling, over the evening, Jacob realizes who's he's wrestling with. Because it was dark, the character of God was half like it's how it is when it's dark. Your night vision, you see things, but you don't see things clearly. So God could be revealed face to face with Jacob because he couldn't be seen clearly. But when day breaks, when the sun comes, God wanted this character left because he couldn't be seen by Jacob in the sun. This character had to be veiled almost. And it's like Moses and the other times where he's like, you can see part of me. You can see all this veiled experience. It's consistent with God revealing himself to man. But it's also very synonymous with the patriarchal idea. Patriarchs of Israel. One of the things that made them a patriarch was having this face-to-face visual encounter. Moses, Abraham, Jacob, they all had this visual encounter with God. The appearance of God was there for them. And it was that's part of the characteristic. Jacob is affirmed as a patriarch through these visions and through this face-to-face encounter. And we also see elsewhere in Scripture where this in Hosea, where this language is described, the language of this description is used slightly differently. And we see in Hosea 12, he strove with an angel and prevailed. He wept and sought his favor. He met God at Bethel, and there he spoke to us. The Lord, the God of hosts, the Lord in his memorial name. So you, by the help of your God, return, hold fast to love and justice, and wait continually on your God. And we see here that the language is similar. He wrestled, but it also says he wept. And he wrestled with an angel. So we see that the story is described slightly differently. He prevailed, which is the same, but yet he wrestled with an angel. Well, does that contradict? Well, no, because we know elsewhere in Scripture, God reveals in the angel of the Lord. So there's this character that's being described here. It's the angel of the Lord. It's God in human-like form, but it's still God. And it's this moment where Jacob is set apart. And he wrestles, but he overcomes. And this moment is very key. Because as it said, you wrestled with God and man and have prevailed. That's the story of Jacob. That's this embodiment right there. Everything we've seen from the very beginning, all the way through to the very end, Jacob is a man of wrestling, striving, working and really wrestling with every situation. There's never really an easy moment in his life because that's who he is. He's a character who really struggles with things. And Heiser on the Naked Bible podcast would say this happened to Jacob, where he had this limp because he needed a physical reminder of that he was God's patriarch, his people. And that up till this point, Jacob was the sort of guy that would bend loyalty, bend responsibilities for his own way, make the most out of it. Like we saw at the very beginning with Esau, he would bend things for his own benefit. But now this mark, this turning at the hip, was a physical reminder to say, you're mine. That vow you made, we hold true. I hold your word true. You're my Jacob. You're my Israel now. You're my people. And now we're going to work together in this. You're going to walk in loyalty to me. And so this Israel doesn't eat the sin is to commemorate that they too are part of Israel, part of Jacob, as part of his people. So it's very different. Obviously, there's also a very different understanding of the sinew of the thigh. In Abraham, the story is used to context of genitalia. So, but it does. Heiser would argue this is not genitalia. This is a thigh for a reason of the mark. But so you know that there are different understandings. But I really believe in this one because it really sets Jacob up because he's the man that needs this. He's a man that needs this reminder for the rest of his life. He's been working on struggling, but God makes the mark to remind him, you're mine, Jacob. I'm yours. As we made this agreement, I'm your God and you're my people. And we see this elsewhere. In Paul, he had the thorn in the flesh. And it was basically this thorn in the flesh is to keep us humble, remind us where our focus is on God, not on the physical things, that we need to remember our relationship with him, that we are his representative, his people, loyal to him. And it's the same as it says in Hebrews 12. If you are left without discipline, in all which you have participated, then you are an illegitimate child and not sons. Beside this, we have earthly fathers who discipline us, and we respected them. Shall we not be much more to be subject to the Father of spirits and live? We all receive these adjustments, these twinges on us to help redirect us. Just as Paul had the thorn in the flesh to keep him humble, Jacob had the twist of the hip to keep his focus right. And maybe you will see things in your life, you're like, God, why do I have this? Or why do I have to struggle with this? We all have these elements where God uses situations to discipline us. Not in the smack on the bum or put you in the corner style, but to grow us, refine us, to help us be his people. And it's a good thing. Hebrews shows us it's a good thing because we are his children. And he is a good, good father. He loves us, he cares about us, and he wants the best for us, and he wants to refine out of us the best of us. And so these difficulties, these twisteds, these pingings, these uncomfortable times are times where we get refined, we grow, we develop to be people of faith who are representatives of him, loyal to him, and have our focus set on him. And sometimes we just need that gentle reminder of going, keep your eyes up. Don't look at the situation. Keep your eyes up. And maybe that's where you feel right now in this situation, this corona, post-corona time, depending when you're watching this, where you're like, God, this situation sucks. Or I've had a difficult time, although these months have been difficult. God said, look at me. If I'm your God and you're my people, I will provide for you. Trust in me by faith, and I will give you and lead you through. And I believe we can all be encouraged by this story. That no matter the story where we've come from, no matter where we have been born or whatever, we are all part of God's family when we give our loyalty to Jesus. And we can be built up, refined, and grow in him. We could grow in him to become better and more like him. And we can see our lives changed and to become like him in a sense that this is beyond this world, where we have contentment in all situations, that we have faith beyond means, where we are peaceful in every situation. And yeah, it takes time. And I, like you, we grow in this day by day. And this time, this season is one where God is preparing us. He's refining us, like he refined Jacob over the years, to be ready for the season to come. Because after this, Jacob went on to become that father that had many sons and prospered and lived in the land. Yes, he still had issues. Yes, he still had problems. But God is willing to work with them. He's not discounting us because of our flaws, but rather he is manifested best in our flaws. So be encouraged and be blessed. And we'll see you hopefully this Sunday or next week for part 5 of our Heroes of the Faith series. God bless, and let me know if you have any questions. Send them in to me. I'd love to hear from them, wrestle through them with you. That we learn and we grow, and I want to take some time where we, on the recording, to go through some of your questions. So please send them in to me at callum@lighthouseantwerpen.be. I'd love to hear from you. You can also have been posting them in the chat, and we can comment them there. So God bless, and see you next week.